Ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Like life's passing you by while you're stuck on repeat? 47-year-old Wyatt knew that feeling all too well. For 22 years, he'd been a long-haul trucker, a rolling cog in the American machine. Each day blurred into the next. Wake up before dawn, gulp down gas station coffee, and chase the endless white line. He was chasing a paycheck, sure, but he was also running from something. Wyatt wasn't always this way. Back in Ohio, he had dreams. He loved tinkering with his dad's old Norton motorcycle, imagined open roads and freedom. Then Sarah came along. At 24, he sold everything he owned, packed his bags, and followed her to Nebraska. 6 months later, she was gone, telling him he was too predictable. That moment became a life sentence. He never went back. The years on the road hardened him, turned his silence into a shield. He settled into a routine of solitude. He'd call his sister Chloe on holidays, but the conversations were strained. Shame gnawed at him for missing his nephew Leo's life. His mobile home in that neglected Nebraska trailer park felt more like a storage unit for a life he wasn't living. He was $35,500 in debt, one truck repair away from disaster. Then the doctor's words hit him like a jackknife. Wyatt, change or lose your license, your leg, your life. The digital alarm on his cracked phone blared 4:00 a.m. Wyatt hit snooze, not once but 3 times. Each press was a small act of defiance against the day, against the life he'd built, or allowed to build itself around him. Finally, he hauled himself out of the cramped sleeper cab, the familiar ache in his lower back, a constant reminder of years spent hunched over the wheel. Gas station coffee was the first ritual, the bitter liquid a necessary evil. He stared at his reflection in the grimy glass door, a ghost of the man he once was staring back. Pale blue eyes, framed by a leathery face etched with the map of 1,000 highways. At 47, he felt older than his years. Back in the cab, the sunrise painted the eastern sky in hues of orange and gray. He flipped open a worn notebook, its pages filled with scribbled mileage logs and fuel stops. Tucked between them was a faded photo of his nephew Leo. 16 now, a young man Wyatt barely knew. He'd missed birthdays, graduations, all the milestones that marked a life. Shame tightened his chest. "Gotta call him," he mumbled, the words lost in the rumble of the engine. His route took him past fields of corn stubble, the skeletal remains of a harvest long gone. It mirrored his own life, he thought, a harvest of potential left to rot. He listened to a history audiobook, a biography of Ulysses S. Grant. The general's resilience in the face of adversity offered a small, momentary comfort. Lunch was a greasy cheeseburger at a truck stop diner, eaten alone, staring at the truckers come and gone. The waitress knew him by name, but their exchanges were limited to nods and grunts. He scrolled through Facebook, saw pictures of his sister Chloe and Leo at a football game. He almost called, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? "Sorry, I missed your whole life." Later that evening, parked at a desolate truck stop in Iowa, he microwaved a frozen dinner. It tasted like cardboard. He remembered his mom's home cooking, the smell of pot roast filling the house on Sundays. That Ohio house felt like a lifetime away. He pulled out his phone, hesitated, then dialed Chloe's number. It went to voicemail. He left a message, his voice rough and unsure. "Hey, Chloe, it's Wyatt. Just, calling to see how you're doing. Tell Leo I said hi." He hung up, the silence in the cab deafening. He looked at the photo of Leo. He wasn't just driving a truck, he was driving away. The alarm blared at 4:00 a.m. Wyatt's hand slapped the snooze button, again and again, 3 times before he finally dragged himself out of the bunk. The gas station coffee was brewing, a dark, bitter smell that barely cut through the fog in his head. Another day on the asphalt. Another day chasing deadlines and dodging bad drivers. Another day further from that Ohio factory town he left behind. He checked his tires, a habit ingrained after 22 years. Grease clung to his calloused hands, etched in deep. $26 an hour, not bad, but not enough. Not enough to outrun the $22,500 on maxed-out credit cards. Not enough to cover the $13,000 he owed the IRS. One breakdown, one major repair, and he was done. He glanced at the picture of Leo taped to the dash. 16 years old, he'd missed it all. The sun clawed over the horizon, painting the empty road in streaks of orange and gray. He gripped the wheel, the vibrations of familiar comfort and a constant reminder of his isolation. Wyatt listened to his Grant audiobook. Grant's tenacity, his refusal to quit, felt a million miles away from the resignation that had settled into Wyatt's bones. Lunch was another cheeseburger at another nameless diner. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda, brought his coffee. "Rough day, Wyatt?" she asked, her voice flat. He just grunted and nodded. Words were wasted on the road. Brenda had seen his type 1,000 times, truckers running on empty, chasing a paycheck and running from themselves. He remembered Sarah, the woman he'd moved for. "Too predictable," she'd said. Those words still stung after all these years. He forced down the greasy burger, the taste a mix of salt and regret. He pulled out his phone, staring at Chloe's name. He hadn't spoken to her properly in months. Just the awkward holiday calls, full of stilted conversation and unspoken guilt. What could he possibly say? Explain why he'd chased a dream that died 20 years ago, leaving him stranded in a life he never wanted. That evening, Iowa rolled by in a blur of grain silos and wind turbines. He microwaved a frozen dinner, the chemical aroma filling the cab. He missed the smell of Mom's pot roast, missed the sound of his dad's laughter, missed the weight of his old Norton motorcycle, the one he sold for Sarah. The bike, the girl, the life, all gone. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, high blood pressure, diabetes. The doctor's words echoed in his head: license, leg, or life. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Chloe's number. He punched it in. It rang, each tone a hammer blow to his conscience. "Hey, Wyatt," Chloe answered, her voice surprised. "Everything okay?" He cleared his throat, struggling to find the words. "Yeah, Chloe, just calling to say hi. How's Leo?" "He's good," she said. "He's been asking about you. He thinks it's cool you drive a truck." Wyatt closed his eyes. He saw Leo's face, the gap-toothed grin in the photo on his dash. He swallowed hard. Tell him I'm coming home soon." The words felt foreign, like a promise he couldn't keep. But as he hung up, a tiny seed of hope sprouted in his weary heart. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to change direction. The next morning, Wyatt didn't hit snooze. He woke up to a blinding headache and the familiar ache in his feet. He felt like he was wearing lead boots. Another day on the road. Another 600 miles of asphalt. The mandatory physical hung over him like a death sentence. He'd known he wasn't healthy. The numbness in his feet, the constant fatigue, the way his vision blurred after a long shift. He'd ignored it all, chalking it up to the job, to getting older. Now it was catching up to him. He pulled into the clinic, the sterile smell of disinfectant doing nothing to calm his nerves. The doctor, a stern woman with tired eyes, didn't mince words. "Wyatt, your blood pressure is through the roof. Your A1C is off the charts. You're pre-diabetic, heading straight for type 2. If you don't make some serious changes, you're going to lose your license." Wyatt stared at her, his mind blank. He'd faced breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, blizzards in the Rockies, and near misses with careless drivers. But this was different. This was his livelihood, his identity being ripped away. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor sighed. "Diet, exercise, medication. You need to lose weight, lower your blood sugar, and get that blood pressure under control. Or," she paused, her gaze unwavering, "you'll lose your license, your leg, or your life. Your choice." The cold, impersonal finality of the words hit Wyatt harder than any emotional plea. He walked out of the clinic, the setting sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. He sat in his truck, the silence amplified by the weight of her words. License, leg, or life. All he had left was the rig. He glanced at the photo of Leo taped to the dash, the one his sister sent him last Christmas. Leo, 16 now, a young man he barely knew. The guilt washed over him, a familiar, bitter taste. He wasn't just hitting snooze on his own life. He was hitting snooze on being the Uncle Leo deserved. He looked at the half-eaten bag of donuts on the passenger seat, a symbol of his neglect, his resignation. Without thinking, he grabbed the bag and threw it in the trash. Then he pulled out his phone and searched for healthy recipes for one. His fingers trembled as he typed. It was a small act, a tiny turn of the wheel, but in that moment, Wyatt felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He had to start somewhere. Sitting there, Wyatt's eyes scanned the familiar interior of his cab, the worn leather of the driver's seat, the faded map book wedged between the seats, the coffee stains on the dash. 22 years. 22 years spent chasing deadlines, dodging traffic, and outrunning his past. But the past had finally caught up, cornering him in a doctor's office with an ultimatum he couldn't ignore. License, leg, or life. The doctor's words echoed in his head. He thought back to Ohio, to his sister Chloe's tear-streaked face when he told her he was leaving with Sarah. He could almost hear his dad's disappointed sigh when he sold the Norton. "You sure about this, son?" his dad had asked, his voice heavy with unspoken concern. He hadn't been sure, but love, or what he thought was love, had blinded him. Now, staring at Leo's photo, the shame burned hotter than ever. He'd missed birthdays, graduations, countless milestones, all for a woman who barely remembered his name, all for a life lived in perpetual motion, never truly arriving anywhere. He'd bottled his emotions for too long, letting anger and sadness simmer into a quiet, consuming fatigue. He looked at his hands, calloused and thick, the grease permanently etched into the lines. Hands that had wrestled tarps in the dead of winter, changed countless flat tires, and gripped the steering wheel for millions of miles. Hands that were now shaking slightly as he scrolled through recipe after recipe on his phone. Chicken breast and broccoli, quinoa salad, things he wouldn't normally touch. He was never much of a cook. He was more of a microwave dinner or diner burger kind of guy. A memory surfaced, his mom in the kitchen, humming as she prepared Sunday dinner, the aroma of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filling the house, a sense of warmth and belonging he hadn't felt in decades. He remembered the last time he saw his mom, just before she passed. "Don't let life pass you by, Wyatt," she whispered, her hand frail in his. "Don't wait until it's too late." He hadn't listened. Not then. Wyatt took a deep breath. "I'm done," he muttered, the words barely audible above the hum of the idling engine. "I am done living like this." It wasn't a grand declaration, no dramatic revelation. Just a quiet, firm decision made in the cab of a truck in a desolate parking lot. A decision to fight for his life, for his health, for a chance to reconnect with the people he loved. He turned the key in the ignition, flipped on his blinker, and pulled the semi out onto the highway. Destination: hope. The next morning, Wyatt woke before the 4 a.m. alarm. The usual dread was replaced by a strange sense of anticipation. He still felt the familiar ache in his lower back, the puffiness around his middle, but something was different. There was a sliver of light piercing through the darkness, both outside and within. He reached for his phone, not to hit snooze, but to search for the nearest grocery store. He found one a few miles off his route, a small, family-owned place with handwritten signs and overflowing produce bins. He felt awkward, out of place in his worn jeans and trucker hat, surrounded by young mothers and health-conscious shoppers. He grabbed a cart, feeling like an imposter pushing it through the aisles. His eyes scanned the colorful produce, the lean meats, the whole grains, foods that were foreign to him. He remembered his dad's words, "You are what you eat, son." Wyatt had been eating despair for years. He picked up a package of chicken breasts, a bag of broccoli, and a container of quinoa. He hesitated, then grabbed a small bag of apples. "Might as well," he muttered to himself. At the checkout, the cashier, a young woman with bright eyes, smiled at him. "Trying something new?" she asked. Wyatt simply nodded, unable to meet her gaze. He felt a flicker of shame, but also a spark of hope. Back in his truck, Wyatt pulled out his hot plate and a small skillet he'd bought at a truck stop years ago. He rinsed the chicken, chopped the broccoli, and measured out the quinoa. The process was clumsy, awkward. He almost burned the chicken. The broccoli turned to mush. The quinoa was bland and tasteless, but he ate it, every last bite. He thought of his mom again, her unwavering love, her quiet strength. He would not disrespect her memory by giving up now. Later that week, parked at a desolate truck stop in Wyoming, Wyatt pulled out the blood sugar monitor he'd been neglecting. The numbers flashed on the screen high, higher than he expected, higher than he wanted to admit. He felt a wave of discouragement wash over him. Was this all pointless? Was he just delaying the inevitable? He looked at the photo of Leo taped to the dash, his nephew's smiling face full of youthful optimism, a kid he barely knew. Wyatt closed his eyes, remembering the last time he saw Leo at his sister Chloe's house. "Uncle Wyatt, can you take me for a ride in your truck someday?" The words echoed in his mind, a painful reminder of his absence. Picked up the phone and dialed Chloe's number. It rang 3 times before she answered. "Wyatt, is everything okay?" Her voice was hesitant, laced with concern. "Yeah, Chloe, I'm okay," he said, his voice rough. "Just wanted to check in on you and Leo." There was a pause. "He's doing good. School's been tough, but he's hanging in there. He asks about you sometimes, you know." Wyatt's throat tightened. "I know," he whispered. "I'm gonna try to be around more." Chloe sighed. "That would be nice, Wyatt, it really would." The call was short, awkward, but it was a start. A small crack in the wall he had built between himself and his family. The next day, Wyatt started taking short walks at rest stops. Just 10 minutes at first, pacing back and forth in the dusty parking lot, breathing in the dry desert air. He listened to another history audiobook about the Civil War, trying to imagine the resilience of those soldiers, the sacrifices they made. He wasn't fighting a war, but he was fighting for his life. He started experimenting with different recipes, finding ways to make healthy food taste better. He discovered spices he had never used before. He even found a truck stop that sold fresh fish. He called Chloe every week, talking to Leo about school, about his favorite video games, about anything to keep the conversation flowing. He was still a long-haul trucker, still driving the endless miles, but he was no longer just going through the motions. He was awake. He was fighting. He was on a new road, a road that led not just to a destination, but to a life. Wyatt sat in the cab, the engine idling. The promise hung in the air, thick as diesel fumes. He looked at the dashboard, at the worn photo of Leo, 16, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. How many birthdays had he missed? How many football games? Shame gnawed at him, a familiar ache. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Fear, cold and clammy, whispered in his ear, "You'll fail, you always do." He closed his eyes, remembering his dad's hands, calloused and strong, guiding him as they rebuilt the Norton. The smell of oil and gasoline, the quiet pride of accomplishment. He hadn't felt that in years. The memory was a small spark in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, he could feel it again. It wasn't about the truck or the miles or even the money. It was about something bigger. He pulled out his worn notebook from the glove box, the one filled with his scribbled poems. He flipped through the pages, past observations about sunsets and highway signs until he found a blank page. He uncapped his pen, his hand shaking slightly. He wrote, "Day 0, no turning back." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the truck stop parking lot. Wyatt watched as another trucker fueled up his rig, his face etched with weariness. They were all in the same boat, chasing deadlines and dodging loneliness. But maybe, just maybe, Wyatt could steer his ship in a different direction, not just for himself, but for Leo, to show him that even a man who's hit snooze for years can wake up and change. He started the truck, the engine roaring to life. He pulled out onto the highway, heading west. He didn't know where this new road would lead, but he knew he couldn't stay still. He had a nephew to be an uncle to, a sister to reconnect with, and a life to reclaim. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But for the first time in years, Wyatt felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. He adjusted his rearview mirror and said out loud to no one, "Let's go." Day 1 hit Wyatt like a runaway 18-wheeler. 4 a.m. came too soon. Every muscle screamed in protest as he swung his legs out of the bunk and onto the floor of the cab. The gas station coffee tasted like burnt tires, but he choked it down. He de-promised himself, and more importantly, he'd pictured Leo's face when he did. That kid deserved an uncle who wasn't a walking heart attack waiting to happen. He stared at the blood sugar monitor in his passenger seat, debating forgetting it again. The doctor's words echoed in his head. Lose your license, your leg, or your life. He checked his blood sugar, higher than it should be. Discouraged, Wyatt ate the protein bar he had bought the night before. It tasted like cardboard. He missed his usual breakfast of 2 gas station breakfast sandwiches and a large coffee. Resignation settled over him like a familiar blanket. 22 years on the road, and this is how it ends, with a protein bar and a blood sugar reading. He fired up the engine, the rumble a hollow sound in the pre-dawn quiet. The highway stretched out before him, a ribbon of gray disappearing into the horizon. His body ached, his eyes burned. All he wanted to do was pull over, crawl back into the bunk, and hit snooze on the whole damn thing. He thought of Sarah, the woman he chased across state lines. Would she even recognize him now? A 47-year-old trucker with a growing belly and a mountain of debt. He clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about him and Leo. Lunch was a battle. He pulled into his usual truck stop, the smell of fried food thick in the air. Every instinct screamed for a double cheeseburger and fries. Instead, he forced down a grilled chicken salad. The lettuce was wilted, the chicken dry. He ate it slowly, deliberately, each bite a small act of defiance. He watched other truckers devour their greasy meals, a pang of envy twisting in his gut. He remembered his dad's advice. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. He hadn't fought for anything in a long time. That night, the exhaustion was crushing. He parked at a desolate truck stop in western Iowa. His back throbbed. He microwaved a bland, prepackaged chicken breast and steamed broccoli. He fought back tears of frustration. This wasn't living, it was surviving. He called Chloe, his sister. The call went to voicemail. He left a short message, his voice rough with fatigue. "Hey Chloe, it's me, just checking in. Tell Leo I said hi." He hung up, feeling the familiar ache of guilt. He hadn't been a brother, hadn't been an uncle. Maybe he could change that. He set his alarm for 4 a.m. Day 4 brought a small victory. His blood sugar was slightly lower. The protein bars were still awful, but he was getting used to them. He even managed a short walk at a rest stop, stretching his stiff legs and breathing in the fresh air. He thought of his secret dream of a small cabin, a garden, the Norton he rebuilt with his dad. Those dreams felt distant, almost impossible. But they were there, flickering like a pilot light in the darkness. He started pre-planning his meals better, looking for healthier options at each stop. The cravings were relentless. The smell of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls at a truck stop nearly broke him. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and walked away. He pictured Leo, his face full of hope. He remembered the shame of missing his nephew's birthdays, his graduations. He couldn't keep letting life slip away. He called Chloe again. This time she answered. The conversation was awkward, stilted. They talked about the weather, about Leo's upcoming football game. But there was a warmth there, a hint of reconnection. "Leo misses you, Wyatt," she said quietly. By the end of week 1, Wyatt was a mess of aching muscles, bland meals, and overwhelming loneliness. He wanted to quit. He wanted to give in. He wanted to go back to his old life, the one where he could eat whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. But something kept him going. The memory of his dad, the spark of hope for the future, and the growing image of Leo. He had one more new habit to work into his routine. He pulled out his notebook, found a blank page, and wrote, "I will not quit." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The road was long, but for the first time in years, Wyatt was facing forward. Week 2 blurred into 3. The relentless rhythm of the road, endless asphalt, fleeting towns, the hum of the engine started to feel different. Day 12. Wyatt woke before the 4 a.m. alarm, a dull ache still present in his lower back, but something felt lighter. He skipped the gas station coffee, opting for a thermos of black coffee he'd made in the cab. He found an apple in his cooler, a small victory over the usual sugar-laden pastry. The changes were small, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but they were stacking up. Instead of microwaving a frozen meal, he heated up a can of chili, adding a handful of shredded lettuce he'd packed. He walked a few extra laps around the truck stop parking lot during his mandatory break, feeling the sun beat down on his weathered face. He listened to a history audiobook about the Dust Bowl, finding a strange solace in the stories of hardship and resilience. It made his own struggles feel, if not smaller, then at least shared. Day 16. A nagging craving hit him hard, a double cheeseburger with all the fixings. He pulled into a greasy spoon diner, the aroma of frying bacon and onions thick in the air. He sat at the counter, the vinyl cold against his skin. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, asked, "The usual, hun?" Wyatt hesitated. He looked at her, then at the menu. "Just coffee," he said, his voice raspy. "And a side salad." He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes. As he ate the salad, he imagined his father's disappointed expression when he sold that bike years ago. He was selling his future too, he realized. Day 21, 3 weeks. Wyatt checked his blood sugar, still high but lower than before. He'd been using the monitor more regularly, tracking his progress, however slow. He'd even started taking short walks during his rest stops, feeling the burn in his legs. He found himself stopping at scenic overlooks, not just for 5 minutes, but for 10, sometimes 15, just to breathe and appreciate the view. He pulled out his worn notebook and wrote a few lines about the sunrise over the plains, the sky ablaze with color. He hadn't written anything in years. He called Chloe again, this time with a plan. "Leo's got a football game next month, right?" he asked. "Yeah," she said, her voice cautious. "Championship game." Wyatt took a breath. "I'm thinking of driving back for it, if that's okay." There was a long pause. "Leo would love that, Wyatt," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. He felt a lump form in his throat. He'd missed so much. He thought of his secret dream of a small cabin. Maybe Leo could visit. Maybe they could even build it together. It wasn't too late. Not yet. Wyatt felt the faintest stirring of hope. The road was still long, but it didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. Day 30, checkpoint, 1 month. Wyatt stared at his reflection in the truck stop mirror. The squint lines around his eyes were still there, the stubble still patchy, but something was different. The resignation wasn't as heavy. He saw a flicker of something. Determination. He didn't know, but it felt like a muscle he hadn't used in years. His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Leo's been asking about you. Says he needs your advice on fixing up his old bike." Wyatt smiled. His nephew following in his footsteps, tinkering with engines. A surge of warmth spread through him. He thought about the Norton he sold for Sarah, the woman who changed his life and then destroyed it. The sale felt less like a sacrifice now, more like a bad investment. Back on the road, the endless asphalt didn't seem so oppressive. The audiobooks still played, but they were competing with his own thoughts. He was planning, calculating. He tackled the IRS debt first, setting up a payment plan, even though it meant cutting back on something else. He'd even started calling his sister more often about the game, about Leo's bike, about anything and everything. Chloe sounded lighter, happier. For the first time in years, Wyatt felt like he was part of something bigger than his cab. He got a call from dispatch. "Wyatt, we need you to run a load out to Denver, urgent." Normally, he'd grumble, resent the change of plans, but this time he just nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice even. "I'll head there now." He thought of the extra hours, the missed rest, but then he remembered Leo's face when he promised to be at the game. He called dispatch back. "Look, I can do Denver, but I gotta be back by the 15th. No exceptions." There was a pause. "All right, Wyatt," the dispatcher said, surprised. "We'll make it work." He pulled into a truck stop that evening. The usual greasy smells hit him, but this time he walked past the burger joint and headed for the small convenience store. He grabbed a yogurt, a banana, and a bottle of water. As he paid, the cashier, a woman he'd seen many times, looked at him, a slight frown on her face. "You okay, Wyatt? You look different." He managed a small smile. "Yeah," he said, his voice a little rough. "Yeah, I think I am." He walked back to his truck, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He thought of his small cabin dream, of Leo, of Chloe, of maybe, just maybe, a life beyond the road. Wyatt settled into a new rhythm. The Denver run was brutal, pushing him to his limits, but he stuck to his guns. Yogurt and bananas replaced the usual late-night burgers. He used the rest stops for more than just bathroom breaks. He'd walk a few laps around the parking lot, feeling the blood move in his legs. The numbness in his feet seemed to be lessening, a small victory against years of neglect. His truck became his gym in a way. He found exercises he could do in the cab during his mandatory rest periods, stretches to ease the ache in his lower back, simple calisthenics to keep his muscles from completely atrophying. The other drivers looked at him sideways, the old-timers shaking their heads. But Wyatt didn't care. He was moving, both physically and metaphorically. One evening, parked at a dusty truck stop in Wyoming, he remembered his dad's old Norton motorcycle. He hadn't thought about it in years, not since he sold it all those years ago for Sarah. That dream was long gone. The woman he moved for was a blur, but his love for tinkering still remained. He found an online forum for vintage motorcycles. It felt odd, typing on his phone with grease-stained fingers, but he felt a spark of excitement he hadn't felt in decades. He even started sketching designs for a custom bike in his worn notebook, the same one he used to jot down his poems. The poems. He hadn't written anything new in months, but as he looked out at the endless expanse of the Wyoming plains, words started to form in his mind. The vastness, the loneliness, the unexpected beauty of the sunset, all filtered through his own newfound sense of purpose. He wrote a few lines, then a few more. It wasn't great, he knew, but it was something. He was something. The calls with Leo became the highlight of his week. Wyatt listened intently as his nephew talked about school, his friends, his struggles with algebra. He even offered to help, pulling out his old textbooks from high school and walking Leo through the problems over video call. He wasn't sure who was getting more out of it, him or Leo. Chloe mentioned that Leo had started calling him Uncle Wyatt instead of just Wyatt. It was a small thing, but it warmed him from the inside out. He was still a long-haul trucker, still living in a mobile home in Nebraska, still staring at the endless asphalt. His debt was a heavy weight, but he was making progress. The payment plan he set up was working, and he was slowly but surely chipping away at what he owed. He started looking for cheaper insurance and even changed banks, moving to a credit union that could give him a better rate. It was all about the little things, the small decisions that added up over time. He told himself, discipline over motivation. During a stop in Des Moines, he saw a pawn shop. On a whim, he went inside. He browsed the dusty shelves, his eyes scanning the tools and instruments. Then he saw it, a used acoustic guitar hanging in the corner. It wasn't anything fancy, but it looked like it was in decent shape. He ran his calloused fingers over the strings, strummed a chord. It was out of tune, but the sound was clear, resonant. He hadn't played in over 20 years. He remembered playing rhythm guitar with his friends back in Ohio, back before Sarah, before the road, before everything changed. He bought the guitar. The pawn shop owner, a gruff man with a missing tooth, just nodded. "Haven't seen someone that happy to buy a guitar in a long time," he said. Wyatt just smiled. That night, parked on the side of the highway, he tuned the guitar as best he could. He started with simple chords, his fingers clumsy and stiff. But as he played, the muscle memory started to kick in. He remembered songs he hadn't thought about in years. He sang along in a low, gravelly voice, the sound echoing in the empty cab. He wasn't very good, but it didn't matter. He was alive. He thought about Sarah again for the first time in weeks, not with anger or resentment, but with a strange sense of peace. She had set him on this path in a way. It was her rejection that had led him to the road, to the isolation, to the life he had built, or rather allowed to happen. But now he was taking control. He was rewriting the story. He thought of Leo, of Chloe, of the small cabin he dreamed of building. He smiled. It was time to get back on the road. The sun was rising. Day 60. The needle on Wyatt's blood sugar monitor hadn't been this low in years. He checked it twice, just to be sure. Even the line of worry etched permanently on his forehead seemed a little lighter. He'd been sticking to it, grilled chicken and steamed vegetables instead of the usual greasy spoon fare. Small changes, but they were adding up. He walked an extra lap around the truck stop every night, pushing through the fatigue. The numbness in his feet was fading, replaced by a faint, unfamiliar tingle. His dispatcher, a woman named Marlene who'd seen every trucker come and go for the last 30 years, actually smiled at him when he picked up his manifest. "You look good, Wyatt," she said, tilting her head. "Lost some weight. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to him. He just nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. This week he got assigned the Chicago Run, a route they usually gave to the guys they trusted. The rhythm of the road was still the same, but everything felt different. He wasn't just driving, he was moving towards something. The history audiobook seemed more vivid, the landscapes more vibrant. He even stopped at a scenic overlook in Iowa just to watch the sunset. He pulled out his worn notebook, the one he kept hidden in the glove box. For the first time in years, words came easy. He wrote a few lines about the orange light painting the fields, about the feeling of finally waking up. He called Chloe on Wednesday. It wasn't a holiday, just a random Wednesday. He almost chickened out, his hand hovering over the phone. But he remembered Leo's face, his shy smile in the picture taped to the dashboard. He dialed. Chloe answered on the third ring. "Wyatt, is everything okay?" Her voice was tight with worry. "Yeah, everything's fine, Chloe," he said, his voice rough with nerves. "Just wanted to see how you guys were doing." They talked for almost an hour. About Leo's upcoming basketball game, about the leaky roof in her house, about their mom's old apple pie recipe. Simple things, real things. He told her about the diagnosis, about the changes he was making. He didn't mention Sarah or the years he'd wasted. "I'm proud of you, Wyatt," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Leo misses you. He asks about you all the time." That night he video called Leo. The kid was taller than he remembered, his voice deeper. They talked about video games, about school, about the guitar Wyatt had bought. "You still play?" Leo asked, his eyes lighting up. "Yeah, a little," Wyatt said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Maybe I'll bring it when I come visit." Leo grinned. "That would be awesome, Uncle Wyatt." The call ended too soon, but Wyatt felt a sense of connection he hadn't felt in decades. Parked outside a truck stop in Indiana, he pulled out the guitar. He strummed a few chords, his fingers more nimble than before. He sang a song he used to play with his friends, a simple country tune about second chances. His voice was still rough, still imperfect, but it was filled with something new, hope. He closed his eyes, picturing a small cabin, a vegetable garden, Leo's smiling face. He wasn't just a trucker anymore. He was a brother, an uncle, a man who was finally coming home. The sun began to set, and the sky was painted with orange and blue. Day 87. Wyatt woke before the alarm. 4:00 a.m., same as always, but different. No hitting snooze. He felt lighter. He stretched, surprised his lower back didn't scream in protest. The gas station coffee tasted better than usual, maybe because he knew the steel-cut oats with blueberries waiting for him in the cooler. The miles blurred. Indiana faded into Illinois. His mind wasn't on deadlines or way stations. He was thinking about his sister, Chloe, and Leo. He pictured them laughing, sitting around a table, maybe even planting those vegetables in his future garden. The image fueled him more than any energy drink ever could. He stuck to the plan. Turkey and avocado wrap for lunch. No fries, no sugary soda. He even walked a few laps around the truck stop, feeling the sun on his face, the wind in his thinning hair. Small wins, but they added up. He checked his blood sugar, lower than it had been in years. He actually smiled. Weeks turned into months. Wyatt kept driving, kept eating right, kept moving. He made the weekly calls to Ohio. He started sending Leo small gifts, a basketball jersey, a video game they'd talked about. He even sent Chloe a small check to help with the roof repairs. It was tight, but he managed. It felt good. Then came the day, the dreaded physical, again. He walked into the clinic, his heart hammering. He knew he'd made progress, but was it enough? He went through the tests, the poking and prodding. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, studied the results. The silence stretched. He felt like he was back in that cab, the words license, leg, or life ringing in his ears. "Well, Wyatt," she finally said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Your numbers are impressive. Your blood sugar is down, your blood pressure is under control, you've lost weight. What have you been doing?" He shrugged, feeling a lump in his throat. "Eating better, walking, trying to take care of myself." She nodded. "It's working. You're still borderline, but with continued effort, you're good to go. I'm signing off on your CDL. Keep it up." Relief washed over him, so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. He mumbled a thank you, grabbed the paperwork, and practically ran out of the clinic. He sat in the cab, staring at the license, feeling the weight of it in his hand. It wasn't just a license. It was freedom. It was a future. He called Chloe, his voice shaking. "I passed," he said. "I got my license back." He could hear her crying on the other end. "I knew you could do it, Wyatt. I'm so proud of you." That night, parked at a lonely truck stop in Iowa, he looked up at the stars. They seemed brighter than he remembered.